have it. Of course, it is the Summit O'Clock. And if you are just joining us for the very first time, this is definitely that particular show that brings you the latest and, of course, conversations that matter to all of us. The picture you see behind me is of a great professor. And, of course, we're going to be talking more about a great institution that the continent of Africa has been needing for such a long time. And we needed it like yesterday, but it's finally here. We'll find out more details about this particular African School of Governance and how it will shape Africa's future. And of course, that is what we'll be talking about right here on the program today. I want to say a big hi, Prof. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I'll be joining you in just a bit, but let me just give some perspective on the African School of Governance. Of course, this is what we know so far about this great institution. There's already a website for it. If you need to know more details, asg.ac, and of course on this particular page you can see there is the home page which talks more about the African School of Governance, and of course it is planning to shape a new era of leadership in Africa through a world-class public policy education, innovative research and dynamic policy engagement focused on Africa's unique experience. So meaning it is made for Africa by Africa, and of course we will be able to check more details on this. If you need to get that particular information, just jump onto the website and you'll be able to find out what you need to do, what is the specific ways of admissions. Of course, you'll look at the insights, policy engagements, and how you can be part of this. And of course, we know that we are live at the moment. For those of us who want to capture the show across digital platforms, this is it. We are live on our YouTube channel. Please go on there and be able to drop your question. Do it now, because I would love to read each and every question that you have for Prof right here tonight. If you're on the X platform, please be able to engage us right there, and the hashtag to use as always is the Summit RW. When you go there and be able to add that particular hashtag, it will make it so easy for me to just click that particular button and be able to track your feedback. As you can see right there, that is where we are at the moment. Let me just join Prof right now so that we can make sense of this amazing institution that is bound to transform Africa, and we want to know how that will happen. Prof, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
You have such a rich CV. I was looking at it, I was just saying, when I grow up, I want to be Prof. Of course, for those who do not know who we have on the show, it is definitely Professor Kingsley Moghalu, who's the president of the African School of Governance. He's joining us right here to make sense of this particular school. And we know that there's been a lot of planning happening to be able to put this together, and as you're the current president. But before we even get into this institution, I want just first of all to understand your personal background and be able to know how this particular school and your position that you hold for it is going to be able to sort out some of the challenges that we've seen, but also amplify the good that we've been able to see. As a firstborn child, this is something that I think a little bird whispered to me and told me, and we know the kind of respect we need to put to firstborns. We do so much out there. Right. Yeah. And not just being a firstborn, you've also played several roles. You've been the deputy governor from 2009 to 2014. You've also ran for office. And I wanted just to make perspective, or make sense of this. Yeah. What inspires you, first of all, to try to be able to say, look, we need something transformational for our great continent from a leadership perspective? Yeah. What pushes you, what drives you, what makes you wake up early in the morning to do this job?
From my childhood, like you note, I was the firstborn in my family. So from very early, I was given leadership responsibility. And I have a passion, not just for trying to do things right, but for doing the right thing. Someone said management is about doing things right.
Yes, not just doing them.
Yeah, but leadership is about doing the right things. So how can we combine doing things right with doing the right thing? That is what creates transformation. And I've always been fascinated by how societies that were once poor, rural, agrarian, became big industrial powers and military and scientific, colossi, in the world. And this is my vision for Africa. And the African School of Governance, which is sort of the child of a vision from President Paul Kagame of Rwanda, and His Excellency Haile Mariam Desalegn, the former Prime Minister of Ethiopia, was such a fascinating thing that I simply could not resist getting involved in competing, because there was a global competitive search for the role of the president, or what some people would call vice chancellor, because it's a university. And so this is what ultimately brought me here.
It's interesting because I know you could be able to, whisper to us some of the untold stories behind the scenes in terms of, making this final decision, the processes of deciding, how do we set up this? How do we ensure that it is inclusive? How do we ensure that it answers to the pertinent leadership gaps and challenges that we face as a continent? And how do we set up KPIs that will be able to allow us to know that we are actually on the right track, we are fixing the challenge while amplifying the good that we do? What are those things?
Well, first of all, President Kagame and Prime Minister Haile Mariam, my understanding is that this journey began a couple of years ago or some years back. There were conversations between two of them about and concern about the state of leadership, the deficit of leadership in the African continent, which has direct impact on the development outcomes and poverty levels. And they felt that there should be a university established with a very focused mind to train the next generation of Africa's leaders with the mindsets, the knowledge and the skills to be able to tackle Africa's challenges and also seize Africa's opportunities in the 21st century. But in their mind, something happened that was very attractive to me personally, and that was this whole emphasis on mindset. You see, there are many people in Africa who are professors. There are many people in Africa who have skills. There are many people in Africa who have knowledge. And yet, why do our countries continue to face the challenges they face? The issue lies in the mind. Because as the saying goes, as a man or a woman thinketh, so he or she is. Development begins in the mind. And so you must have the mindset for leadership that is transformational, that is selfless, so purpose-driven leadership. So that's what is very unique about the African School of Governance in terms of the vision of the kinds of people that will be produced from here. And so we are more than just a school, more than just a university. This is the beginning of a movement for leadership and governance transformation for concrete outcomes in Africa, by teaching people to have the right mindset about leadership and governance, and then to have the skills to actually practically to be able to govern. We have governments, but we don't have a lot of good governance.
I like that. This is just music to my ears, because I've moderated several panels that involves several leaders or heads of institutions who are supposed to spearhead, changes in that would impact societies positively. But some of them have argued on that specific notion that we need a mindset change. And my question has always been, do we need a school? And how do we change this mindset?
We need a school.
And finally, a school is here. Talk to me a bit about the how now. How do you change this mindset? Are we going to go in and there's a formatting of our brain?
Machine.
Exactly.
No.
What's happening?
No, the way we are going to go about it is just as any other educational process. So we are going to have, for example, I'm the president of the university, and I am not required to teach. But I wrote a book about 10 years ago called Emerging Africa, How the Global Economy's Last Frontier Can Prosper and Matter. And I advanced what was at the time a radical thesis in this book, that the secret to transformation lies in the mind. The secret of development begins in the mind, and something that we call, to use a big word, a worldview, which is your relationship with your inner mind and with the environment around you. How do you seek to dominate the environment around you and make it productive for you and for society? And how do you see yourself, in terms of where you're coming from, where you're going, how you intend to get there. How do you see yourself in terms of your value systems? How do you see yourself in terms of a strategy for getting to where you want to get to?
And you must be grounded
exactly
to actually what you want to achieve.
Exactly.
Measure.
How do you measure
yes.
your progress?
Correct.
And as it is for individuals, so it is for countries. And it is the absence of this element of what I call the worldview that is the secret reason why Africa seems challenged in terms of creating prosperity for its people. Now, in the book I gave the example that if you want to look at China and why China has in 40 years transformed, if you want to look at the Western world, you will see that there's one common element, and that is this element of what I call the worldview. In China, the worldview is one of a very long perspective on time, which comes from Zen Buddhism, Confucianism, and things like that. So you find the Chinese naturally given to very long-term thinking. They think in 100 years, 50 years.
Not just
they don't just think about now. They think about beyond now. They also have a social system that prioritizes order and stability. And from there, you now find that the society is much more important than the individual. That's the Chinese or the Asian worldview. The West has a totally different worldview. It's based on scientific rationalism. It's based on individual rights, and it's based on institutions that check on trammeled power.
How about Africa? How gonna do it?
So, what is Africa's worldview?
Correct.
Or what is the worldview in individual African countries? In the book, I argued that until we answer this question, we're simply treading water. And ASG, to me, when I now became aware of this university, I said, this is the institution that will train a lot of young people and a lot of experienced people to begin to think in this manner. And so I personally intend to teach a course on mindset formation.
I would love to be in that class.
Yes, and that is the worldview formation that will drive Africa's ambition to rise and not just accept anything and be satisfied easily.
You've said something, and I think if my count is right, almost twice or more. Young leaders. To manage the 21st century challenges. What happens to our current leaders? Are we fixing them as well? Or are we going to say, okay, you guys continue how you've been doing, but we know that there's change that's coming through the young people that we want to tap on. What happens to the current leaders?
The ASG has a value proposition for both our current leaders and the upcoming young leaders. But let's start from the foundation. We recognize that, look, there's a saying, the young shall grow, the old shall die. It doesn't wish anybody anything bad, but it's a biological fact. Africa is populated mostly by young people.
It's the youngest continent.
It's a young continent. So if you want the continent to be transformed, you must first of all primarily target that youthful population, change their mindsets, give them the skills, give them the knowledge, and help them to find opportunities. So that's one, and we will do that through the MPA program, the Master of Public Administration. And the people who will attend it, are young professionals who are young career professionals who have maybe about 5 years experience out of university and they're early in their careers. But we also have something for the leaders, the older people. We will have executive education, which MPA is a 2-year master's degree, but we will have executive education, short courses of 2 weeks, 3 weeks that will teach specific skills to the people who now are leading. How do you run the budget of your country? How do you measure your program management success or your progress? How do you, AI is coming, can you adapt to it? How do you, undertake strategy? How do you manage risk to your enterprise? You find that the older generation of leaders mostly do not understand these things.
Yeah.
They're very interested in power, they're interested in having political power, but they're not interested in the governance skills that make political power transformative.
Right.
So we will also target them with executive MPA, which is a part-time. You'll do it mostly online. You can do executive short courses of 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And then we will have a senior leaders fellowship, which will be a 6-month stay for retiring or retired heads of states or people at that level, you know, who have a lot of experience to come and share their experience, learn and share. Learning never ends. And even if you are considered a failed leader, there are things that people can learn from your experience.
Even from your failure.
Even from your failure.
I think you're trying to be diplomatic.
Well, you know, I'm a diplomat, among other things. Yeah, so...
Interesting. I'm keen to understand when you say leadership, positions, those holding leadership positions in terms of these trainings that they can get from the African School of Governance.
Yes.
I just want some clarity, especially on the level of leadership.
Yes, absolutely.
Because most of the conversations we've had that the challenge is always at the very top.
At the very top, yes.
And so even if we fix the other ministers, if we fix, you know, the other heads of government bodies and institutions, but not fix the top, there's a problem. How do you fix that? Is there something, is there an antidote from the African School of Governance to fix that, and how?
There is no magic wand, but we have strategies to be able to directly access Africa's leaders with our research, with our policy advocacy, with the Senior Leaders Fellowship Program, you know, and through executive education. A very wise man once told me that I should not propose to African leaders leadership training, that I should invite them for a leadership conference and maybe propose that they will be teaching. But in the process, they are also learning. What was he saying? They're saying that the ego of many leaders is big, and they don't feel that they need to learn
in a class.
So there are many types of interactions through which knowledge and skills and mindsets can be exchanged and imparted. So we will have 3 legs for the ASG. Education, which is the master's programs. Then we will have research. We will have 4 research centers. And then we will have policy advocacy, which takes the outcome of all this research into governments and into the private sector and into civil society through various forums. Some of them can be here at ASG, some of them we can go to your country to do with you or for you. So we're quite flexible, you know, in terms of how we can train leaders. If you feel that you don't have enough time to leave your country to come to ASG, we can come to your country and you know, rub minds with you and say, this is how you can help your economy, this is how you can help your democratic process, and so on. So we are very conscious of the need for ASG to be a very practical, you know, a tool to help African countries to actually make progress, not to be some just academic institution where people do research that is just buried in, you know, arcane journals. We will do concepts, but we will teach people how to manage their risks. We'll teach them strategy. We'll teach them all kinds of things, you know, program management and evaluation. And we will, you know, promote African narratives, because one of the reasons our leaders resist change is the view that people who are telling them to change do not understand Africa. So we are grounded in Africa's realities at ASG, and we will teach, research, and advocate in the context of Africa's realities. So this is very important that we do this, because even in every African culture, there is good, there is bad. So if we tell you to draw from the good aspects of African cultures, you will not resist it as much as if you felt I was coming from London or Washington and telling you something that looks foreign to you.
Doesn't look...
And we will also show the successes in Africa as a way of incentivizing African leaders and African countries.
Right.
So it's not just Singapore, it's not just Japan or China. Right here in Africa, there are countries that have made a lot of progress.
Right.
And I believe Rwanda is one of them. No country is perfect, but you can measure the progress. For example, over the past 30 years, I have been involved with this country from a different life. I was a United Nations official for 17 years. And in 1994, during the genocide, I was political desk officer for Rwanda at the UN headquarters in New York. And so this is how I came to know this country and to become very interested in it. Later on in my career, I was a legal advisor and the spokesman for the UN International Tribunal for Rwanda in Arusha, Tanzania. And so where we prosecuted the architects of the genocide. So I understand how far Rwanda has come. There are countries like Mauritius. There are countries like Botswana, which even though they've had problems recently, but for a long time, they managed themselves fairly well. So there are success stories, in Africa, and we will do case studies.
Including those that are not to the level that you'd want others to go through.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
This would be interesting. I want to understand because the African School of Governance is based here.
In Kigali, yes.
In Kigali, Rwanda. Africa is big.
Yeah, big country. Yeah.
Geographically speaking, how do you intend to ensure that you're serving Africa?
Africa, yes. Well, first of all, we are going to look at every country or every region in Africa uniquely. There are things that may apply to the whole of Africa, but we recognize that Africa is not one country.
Correct.
And so we will use case studies that bring out the uniqueness of each country. And how does every country in Africa organize itself?
Yes.
Based on its own, vision, its own cultures, the good aspects of those cultures. Let me just give you an example. Because we're going to have 4 research centers.
Yes.
One research center is going to be called the Center for Homegrown Innovations in Governance in Africa. There will be the Center for African History and Leadership. There will be the Center for Trade and Regional Integration. And there will be a Center for Technology in Governance. So if we take this point of departure, we will then, develop case studies, research, convenings that share experience between African countries. And many Africans, for example, come to Rwanda to do case studies and to learn how the country has made progress.
Benchmarking.
The ability to plan, the organizing principle. And some of that organizing principle is based on African cultures. For example, Umuganda. In Rwanda. I hope I got that right.
Yes.
And that's what they do in terms of organizing community service the last weekend of every month. And whatever is the challenge the community is facing, whether it's building roads, whether it's clearing the grass, whether it's just cleaning up. The community approaches it as a community. That's how you know that development begins in the mind, and it's about multiple minds coming together. Transformation will always occur.
Right.
Why is this country one of the cleanest countries in the world? It's because of leadership that has some vision about how the country should be. And this is the case in every other country that has made progress.
Right. And I hope that when the students or the trainees or the mentees will be part of this process, you can be able to follow up on that, because I've seen personally, some leaders from parts of Africa come here for benchmarking. But only for them to go back or be here just on a joyride. And we've seen some of their citizenry calling them out on that, because when they go back, it's back to business.
It's back to business as usual.
And we want business not to be usual in this case. So
Absolutely.
Talk to me a bit about the aspect of because you mentioned centers of excellence. And several people have come up and they've done master classes on leadership. But the African School of Governance is not just a master class.
No, it's not just a master class.
So
it's a life experience.
Life experience
in leadership.
In leadership. Do you have a location building with physical presence? and all that. Talk to us a bit about the composition and formation.
Yes. When the leaders, the political leaders, envisioned the African School of Governance, the first thing they did was to create the African School of Governance Foundation. The foundation now gave birth to the African School of Governance itself, which is an independent international university.
Correct.
Even though we're located in Rwanda, we are not a Rwandan university. I should be very clear about that. And we are Pan-African and Pan-African facing. Our students will come from all the countries of Africa. So this is the thing. We have a physical campus which is at the headquarters, the old headquarters of the Rwanda Development Board, the RDB, which the government donated to the ASG and is now under reconstruction to be fit for purpose. And that reconstruction should be completed by, I would say, June, latest June, July next year, because we plan to open our doors to start classes for the MPA in September 2025. And that building is being designed in a very interesting way for physical, online, presence, experience, but also online education, which we will use heavily because the world is a digital and technological world today.
Interesting.
And so you cannot, run away from that.
Right.
Yeah.
There must have been a reason why in the naming it is not African School of Leadership, but is African School of Governance.
Yes. Let me discuss this. This is a very important point you have made.
Yeah.
Now, there is an assumption that leadership will be part of that training. But we observed that the major problem African countries face is not understanding the relationship between leadership and governance. Leadership is the will, the vision to drive transformation and to lead a people to a better future. But governance is how you do it. So we will teach leadership, but even more important, we will teach the practical skills of government. So that's why it was named the African School of Governance. Yes. Because many states, many countries in Africa they're fragile. They're weak because they do not meet the fundamental definition of having state capacity, which is three things: the ability to secure your territory, the ability to mobilize revenues efficiently and effectively, the ability to deliver social services. These are practical things that have to be taught. And these are the things we're going to be focusing on in the ASG. We will, of course, teach leadership as well, So we will combine the two.
Yes.
But it was named African School of Governance to address, and there are many, institutions that focus on leadership. There is an African Leadership University in Rwanda.
Correct.
So I suppose that part of the thinking was, no, we don't need to duplicate. Although that is an undergraduate university, we are a graduate school. We're a postgraduate university. But the focus on governance is very intentional.
Yeah, I like that. I want to invite you. You're watching this right now. You've been hearing this conversation over the past 30 minutes or so, and you might be having a question or so, or a comment, or how you'd like to be able to, put in your thoughts on this particular conversation that we're having right now. Please feel free to join us. Just leave a comment either on our X platform at the hashtag #TheSummitRW. I'll be happy to read your feedback, your comment right away. You can also reach us on our YouTube channel that is live right now. Go onto the comment section, leave a comment. I'll be happy to read that. I have a message that is actually saying to your invitee tonight, what if I want to be the first PhD candidate of the Institute? What would it take?
Good question. We will be making some announcements as from January. About the admissions process, but the ASG at this time does not offer PhD programs. We offer master's degree programs. There are other universities where people can go for their PhDs. I'm sure that at some point in the future, we will get to the PhDs, but you don't start there. We start with the masters because that's where we feel the greatest need. Yeah, so that's my response to that particular question.
Right.
That the individual should look at universities that offer PhD programs.
Right.
We offer master's degree programs at ASG.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I have another question, Emeka. on our YouTube channel is asking, how can the Institute reach out to young people being groomed to take over from elders? You spoke about the young people, but
Yes.
now let's talk about the how.
Yes, there are a number of ways. We have a Young Leaders Program in the ASG that will be starting next year.
Yeah.
And that is a 6-week training program for young people in leadership, you know, to help them to identify the sources of leadership, how they can be leaders from within themselves, you know, to understand that the myth that leaders are born not made, you know, is not true. You can become a leader. Anybody can be a leader in any sense of the word. Leadership is not about position. Leadership is about, you know, vision, attitude, and being able to influence for progress. That's leadership. So we will have the Young Leaders Program. We will have the MPA, and then we will have things for more senior people. So we bridge the gap between the young and the older generation.
Interesting. We are reading your feedback, so please throw in every question you'd like to hear from Prof. I have another one from Henry Rikaza, who says, very interesting listening in. Thank you so much for joining us. Fiston says, my name is Festus. I see a problem in the future because schools where materials are given in foreign languages, some don't even understand those languages. What is your view on that? You say that you know, there'll be students coming from different walks of life. We speak different languages across the African continent.
That's true.
How do you incorporate the aspect of language in these trainings?
Well, you know, Rome was not built in a day. The language of instruction at ASG will be mainly English. You know, so, but we encourage national authorities to develop language, you know, relevant adaptations of whatever we produce. You know, Africa has a problem of many African countries are not homogeneous language-wise. Rwanda is one of the few where everybody speaks Kenyan Rwanda. In many African countries, there are multiple languages. So it is either you adopt one or like Swahili became the national language in Tanzania and much of East Africa, you know, or you can actually create one. There have been, you know, proposals to create languages, you know, so there are many ways, but it's not a problem that we can realistically solve at this time.
At the moment. Right, let me just check out another comment right here. Dolapo Aina says, interesting discussion between the president of ASG Africa, Professor Mogalu, and of course, he's actually saying that on Africa, the right mindset and the right governance is what we need. I think you spoke a bit about that. I want to just take us now to the kind of talent that is at the African School of Governance from a perspective of the human resource. What kind of professors, trainers, pulling them. Someone probably is listening and is saying, this is what I've been looking for, a platform where I can multiply myself. Can I get an opportunity to actually train and at this particular school? What does that look like? Maybe in
we're in the process of recruiting human resources for ASG. We have advertised some posts. We will be advertising many more posts, including the faculty. We are recruiting faculty to teach leadership. We are recruiting faculty to teach economics for public policy. We are recruiting faculty to teach decision sciences, which is data and statistics. We are recruiting faculty to teach public policy, the framing of it and the execution of it. We are recruiting faculty to teach international relations and various other fields. And by mid next year, we should have our full faculty bench and other executive officers. And then we're ready to open for classes in September.
That's super.
And so people should be looking out at our websites and announcements that we will be making as from January.
Interesting. Pauline Ruziviza is asking, how are the scholarships planned for affordability to smart Africans?
Good question. First of all, there will be scholarships for deserving students, but we do not intend to give scholarships to everybody because, first of all, there are many Africans who can pay our fees, and those fees are not going to be exorbitant. We will announce them, as I said, as from January, we'll be coming out with specific announcements, and so we hope to have a pool in which a majority of our student body are able to pay their fees because we want to be a going concern. but for the students that are very unique, specially talented, but verifiably are not able to, then we will find some solutions.
All right. Interesting. Ivana's World. This is an interesting name. It says, indeed, ASG will be transformative. May he tell us about the admission requirements, selection process, and sponsorship possibilities. Are this information available right now?
Well, we will be issuing announcements in February.
Right.
In January.
In January.
Yes.
Right.
Like I said, that are very down to these specifics. But I've given you the profile.
Right.
We're looking mostly for, mid-career young professionals who are about 5 years out of school and are already in careers or in their own employment in some way or the other. There's a strategic reason for this because when you start with mid-career students, when they go back, they have an organization they're going back to, and they'll spread the gospel of the ASG, and that attracts more support for the school. There'll be about 20% that we will admit straight out of university, maybe first class students and things like that. So this is the profile that we will be looking at for the Master of Public Administration.
Right, and let's take a few minutes to just clarify or set the record straight here.
Sure.
There's someone probably who saw the vision bearers of this amazing African School of Governance, and also maybe from the way we started the conversation, and maybe they're like, okay, this is just going to be something that is targeting those in political leadership.
Oh, no, not at all.
That.
Absolutely not. Actually, the leadership is multidimensional.
Correct.
There's leadership in the private sector. There's leadership in civil society. There's leadership in your family. There's leadership in politics. So it's a misconception to think that we're just going to be targeting political leaders. No, we will be teaching people leadership skills that can be deployed in private businesses, can be deployed in civil society, can be deployed in the civil service, can be deployed in the political arena. So it's more of a broad-based approach to leadership as a concept that we all can carry with us and transform our immediate environments, even if we're not presidents and prime ministers transforming countries. But leadership can transform smaller spaces, so that's what we are about, including those who will transform countries, of course.
Powerful. That's good that we clarify that. John Kalisa is a big fan of you. He says, congratulations, Kingsley. Keep it up, and we are proud of you, and you make a substantial contribution to the African School of Governance. That's super, super interesting. I just want to pick a few, take a few minutes to just talk a bit about your KPIs.
Yes.
Not just you as an individual, as the president of Africa School of Governance, but generally. You must have drawn out something. How are we going to make
what we are looking at is that there will be short-term KPIs, medium-term, and long-term. In the short term, our first assessment of ourselves is the kind of pool of student applicants that we're able to attract. Because it's what comes out, what comes in, that goes out. So we have certain benchmarks for that, and I've given you some of it. Strong academic performance, professional experience in the early stages, not in the advanced stages. Those ones are for the executive Master of Public Administration. We will be looking at people of demonstrable character. So that's one. Then we're looking at 2 years from 2025. When the first cohort will graduate, what will be their performance? Then we're looking at them getting back into jobs and into different roles. And after 5 years, we will begin to see the early impact of the ASG. And then in 10 years, you will begin to feel it across the whole continent. And we will have ways to measure in terms of where are our graduates, what are they doing, how have they imparted what they have learned at ASG into what they're doing. And we'll have all kinds of metrics to measure those things and feedback mechanisms so that we can correct ourselves if there's a need to. You see, Harvard, Yale, Oxford, I myself have taught in some of these universities. They all started one day. Harvard started in 1636. Oxford started 3 or 4 centuries earlier. Today, they are household names. I can tell you that the power of a vision and the vision for Africa that the ASG represents, that one day, 25 years from now, not even 100 years, everybody will be talking about the ASG in terms of the pool of people it has produced and their transformative capacity.
Right. I want to ask you something, just landing on that point, especially on some of the concerns we've seen from, market place, especially when people graduate from these higher learning institutions.
Yes.
There's always been this argument that there's a huge disconnect.
Yes.
They graduate and they cannot be able to sustain the pace, and the job market is feeling, these higher learning institutions are not churning the right kind of people that we're looking for. How different or how unique with the Africa of Ghana is going to fix this?
Yeah, one of the functions we will have in our academic offering is the matter of career counseling and career impact.
Yes.
So we're going to be counseling students, apart from the academic training, about how to make impact in society and in their own spaces and communities. So this is something that we're going to focus on, so that everyone that graduates from ASG, or at least most people, are making very positive contributions. And you begin that process from the selection process in terms of the pool you're admitting. I told you, what comes in is what goes out.
Yes.
So when good things come in and we strengthen them, they go out and become even better things. But if we start admitting just anybody, simply because we're looking for students, or no, we're going to be quite selective. I want to be very clear. It's not going to be easy to get into ASG.
Yeah.
It's going to be competitive.
Yeah.
And only the best will make it.
Yeah, that's powerful. Christine Alupo is saying kudos for this initiative. It will strengthen Africa's capacity to appreciate and concretize what we have in common for better outcomes. It should promote the cultural and intellectual construct that we need.
Yes.
What comments do you have for her?
I agree with her. I think I know Christine.
Yes.
I think she's a central banker in one of the African countries. I am a former central banker myself. I was deputy governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. And in the 5 years I was deputy governor, we led a series of reforms that overhauled Nigeria's financial system after the global financial crisis of the late 2000s. And that's why you find in Nigeria today, it's the biggest fintech market in Africa and one of the biggest in the world. It's because people who had vision, people who had capacity, put in place some reforms. And so through ASG, we will use this as a case study, together with other case studies of reforms in other African countries. But there's one thing I want to say about ASG. The first is that African countries themselves and their governments and their private sector must support the ASG. It's very important that we have, because we're homegrown, we expect home support. You see what I'm saying? So we're not going to be just relying on the goodness of strangers. So that's one. The other thing I want to say is that in Africa, we need to begin to understand some fundamental things. I call them fundamental understandings. And it is the absence of those understandings that has kept many African countries down. One of those fundamental understandings is that democracy is useless if there isn't good governance that delivers results. So it just becomes a political game, musical chairs between this party and that party, but people are getting poorer. So we need to focus on this aspect of governance and make governance the basis of politics in African countries. The other thing we need to all understand is that if we focus on the things that separate us rather than the things that can unite us, we will not make progress in African countries and as Africans. And that's why vision matters, because vision transcends. It brings people of different, attitudes and different identities together. So, but there's something that unites them, and that's what I call the world view. So the other thing that I think we need to make very clear in ASG, vis-a-vis Africa and the world, I could be very controversial, but let me be clear. There is no such thing as an international community. And Africans are certainly not wards of such a community. Nobody is coming to save you if you don't save yourself. So the conflicts in Africa, we must find a way to fix them. the economic opportunities. Yes, we can work with the rest of the world, but we must know what we want in engaging with the rest of the world. And that's why I say that this whole concept of the worldview is very important. I have my own worldview, and I never leave home without it. It's like my American Express card. And if you deal with me for a little while, you will see immediately those things. You know, so this is what we have to teach ourselves as Africans. We have to develop our own narrative and to be confident that we too are God's children, entitled to a place under the sun.
I love that. But the challenge is, it sometimes looks easier said
than done. Yes.
Because practically, if you look even at some of our Pan-African institutions, they are funded by outsiders, for lack of a better word. We've not been able to actually run our own affairs. Your work really is cut
out for us. I know. It's not, and look, I don't want to pretend this is a walk in the park. It's not. But the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
What is keeping you awake at night, giving you sleepless nights, especially through this project?
How I am terrified of the ASG failing. And that thought keeps me awake at night, making sure that ASG will succeed as its president. I've never failed in anything I've done in my life, and the ASG is not going to be the beginning.
It's going to be the first one. You've made a case, or sort of you've said that you want the ASG to be supported by, Africans should support, private sector governments should support ASG. Why?
The reason is because when you own something, when you have a sense of ownership, you're then vested in the progress of that thing. And you can connect with the possibility of that thing to contribute to your own progress. So it's a mutually beneficial relationship. If African countries support us, it makes it easier for ASG to help them. You know, that's the reason why. And then, of course, there's a sense of dignity that is very important, that Africans develop more and more and more. And one of the reasons I respect Rwanda and its government, they deal with the rest of the world, but they have a sense of dignity about themselves as well. You know, this country after the genocide relied a lot on foreign aid, but over the years that went down because there was an intentionality to reduce the reliance on foreign aid.
The election here is funded 100% locally by government.
And that's interesting. So, you know, these are the things, when I talk about fundamental understandings, you know, you are God's child. You are entitled to a place under the sun, just like the American, just like the Swiss, just like the Japanese. Actually, one of the reasons we will teach African history a lot at ASG is so that people recognize that we have glorious contributions and pasts that were great as civilizations, in addition to the problems we've had that came from the transatlantic slave trade, that came from colonialism. Yes, but that's no excuse. Asian countries were also colonized. They've left that behind and they're moving on. So even though I recognize the impact of historical factors, but I don't allow that to make me believe and turn it into some excuse that, oh, but do you know that there was slavery for 300-400 years? Oh, do you know there was colonial?
You've got to move on.
You've got to move on.
Catch up.
You've got to move on, catch up, and overtake. When we talk about globalization, I say to people, look, globalization is not benign in its intent. It's not agnostic in its belief. Globalization is an agenda, and there are people who are driving it. And we should not be passengers. We should not be content to be passengers in that bus. We must at least become bus conductors and eventually become drivers. How do we do that? By becoming part of the production value chain of the goods of globalization. A Toyota made in Japan has 15,000 spare parts. Most of those parts are made in different parts of the world. But you say, this car is made in Japan. This is globalization. And the people who are making those little parts are all making money from some change from it. So Africa should find its own niche and manufacture value-added products that contribute to the goods of globalization and trade mostly within itself as a continent. That's why you have the African Continental Free Trade Area, and that's why we have a center. We're going to have a center for trade and regional integration. Because let me just give you some statistics. It's again one of those fundamental understandings. How do countries rise? Somebody's telling you that free trade will develop you. But you have been doing this free trade for decades and you're not yet developed. You have not stopped to ask yourself what's going on here. The reason is that many of those countries used protectionism to build their own markets and their local industries. When they now felt they were competitive, they started pushing the agenda of free trade so that their goods can reach everywhere in the world. That's the agenda of globalization, right? So now, I'm not saying we should just become protectionist totally, but we have to be wise. Now, 70% of the trade of all European countries takes place within Europe. 60% of all of Asia's trade takes place within Asia. 40% of all of the trade in North America takes place within North America. Only 13% of Africa's trade takes place within Africa. How can you achieve prosperity? So we need to shift without turning our back to the world, but we need to shift. And part of what ASJ will impart in African leaders today and those coming up tomorrow will be these strategic understandings and how to turn them into practical policies that work on the ground.
And let's talk a bit about the duration of the courses. What are the packages looking like?
Well, like I said, the MPA, the Master of Public Administration, will be a 2-year program. That will be our flagship program. Then we have executive courses, which will be 2 or 3 weeks. Then we'll have the executive MPA, which will be online mediated learning, could be 2 or 3 years. So these are the time durations of the different educational programs. But like I said, we'll be teaching and awarding degrees, we'll be researching, and we will be advocating policy. So we're going to be combining a lot of things in ASG.
Meaningful partnerships make us go far. And achieve a lot more. Talk to me about the kind of partnerships under ASG.
ASG is actually founded on the concept of some strong strategic partnerships. There are 2 that already are foundational. One is the partnership that we have with the MasterCard Foundation, which has its young leaders and putting young Africans to work program. So they've been a very strong partner of ASG. And then we also have a founding strategic partnership with the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy at the National University of Singapore. So what Lee Kuan Yew has been to Asia in terms of developing a world-class school of public policy with Asian characteristics is what the ASG will be for Africa. We will be like Harvard, but African, not white, not Western, but we will achieve the same level of quality and, by the grace of God, the same level of impact over the next decades and generations to come.
It's usually the shortest 1 hour. Can you imagine it's almost done?
Oh, wow.
They're already whispering in my ears, we need to start.
Oh, my God.
Let me throw in a quick question which says, execution is a major pain in Africa.
Yes.
Do the programs provide for apprenticeships or immersive teaching?
Yes, we do. We have capstones. We will have, arrangements where students over in the gap between the first year and the second year will be attached to very practical, institutions or entities of whatever their interest is, and they will learn in that way. We will also teach execution. You see, because we recognize that many African countries, some have good policies, but execution becomes a
challenge.
The discipline of execution, and that's where strategy comes in. And we have a saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So we are going to be looking at African cultural characteristics that might prevent us from being effective at the execution and promoting the African cultural characteristics that support effective execution. So again, we come back to the mindset. You see? Yeah, that's very important.
I love the whole concept behind this. It sounds so nice. And like you said, the challenge is now, or what keeps you awake at night, is just not the success of this big vision. What sort of help, what sort of support do you need other than like the one you said, African leaders, private sector institutions should support? How would that support look like?
Support looks like this. 1, money makes things happen. We are in existence today because we got financial support. Otherwise, you can have a dream and the dream dies. So financial support for ASG is important. 2, supporting ASG by applying to ASG. You know, we want to take students from each of the 55 countries in Africa. So that way, it's Pan-African, and it can eventually affect the whole of the continent. We're looking at about probably 80 to 100 students in our first cohort in September next year. So we want people to apply. By showing interest and applying, you are supporting ASG. Third, we want ASG to be promoted by Africans and looked up to as something of pride for them, something that belongs to them. You know, so when you're talking about the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, for example, you know, you're looking at the ASG, you know, in that light as well, as a place of value.
Can take pride in it.
And take pride in it, yes, you know. So this is how, you know, educational institutions, you know, transform societies. We have received my LinkedIn and my social media, they've been blowing up since the ASG was launched, you know, so we know there's a lot of interest out there already. Yes.
Prof, 1 hour is done.
Ooh.
If there's anything that we need to pick out of this conversation that has happened for the last almost 56 minutes, what would that be?
Africans are God's children, entitled to a place under the sun. And we must succeed on our own terms and on our own narrative. And the ASG is part of that movement. We must govern ourselves. We should not be content to exist. We must have the ambition to thrive, the way that people in Japan are thriving, the way that people in China are thriving, and it is the responsibility of our leaders. And frankly, anybody who is in a position of authority and leadership and is not driving in this direction really should have his or her conscience examined. And we want to produce a critical mass of people who will drown out those nectarine nabobs of negativity.
Prof, I'm already fired up.
Fired up, ready to go.
ready to go. I want to say thank you so much for making
Thank you very much, Eugene, for having me. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Indeed, and it doesn't end here.
No, not at all.
We keep talking.
Yes.
And of course, we'll definitely support from whatever areas and you know, powers that we have to be able to support you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Of course, we want to say thank you for making time. It is time for us to draw down the curtains for this edition of the Summit. Murakoze Chane for being part of this show tonight and every other night that we've always been right here. The conversation continues across our social platforms. I can see Kalisa is clapping. Well done, Anangu and Prof, for very inspiring. Thank you so much, John. Tonfis, we were not able to take your comment, but of course it's a comment that can be taken up even offline from here. But Murakoze, thank you so much for being a part of the show. In case you want to be part of this, keep talking to us. The hashtag, as always, is the Summit RW. I'll see you again next time, same place. As always, my name is Eugene Anangwe. Thank you so much for being part of the show. Prof.
Murakoze. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I thought that